I raised my son with my own hands, sacrificed my youth, my comfort, and even the small dreams I once had. But the day he told me I wasn't good enough to stand in his new world of wealth and polished people, something inside me broke. They thought a simple old mother could never fight back. They thought they could hide their greed behind their expensive smiles. But they didn't know that a mother who is betrayed becomes more dangerous than all their lies combined. And the night my son stood on that shining stage, celebrating a success built on my money, I walked up to that microphone and revealed a truth that made the entire hall freeze in silence. My name is Linda, and I am 64 years old. I never imagined that at this age, when most women are surrounded by grandchildren, warm kitchens, and family dinners, I would be standing alone, learning truths that shattered the last pieces of my heart. I wasn't born rich. My late husband, Robert, and I worked simple jobs all our lives. After he passed away 12 years ago, every responsibility landed on my shoulders. But I didn't complain. Not once. My entire world became my son, Ethan. People in our neighborhood used to say, "Linda, you spoil that boy too much." But how could I not? He was all I had left. I still remember the nights I returned from my job at the hospital laundry, my hands cracked from detergents, my back stiff from carrying loads, but I would quietly stand by his bedroom door, watching him sleep. I used to tell myself, if he becomes something in life, all this pain will be worth it. I never bought anything for myself. Not clothes, not jewelry, not even proper shoes. Every extra dollar went into Ethan's school, his books, his lunches, his sports. I wanted him to grow up believing the world was wide and endless, not cramped like my life had been. But somewhere along the years, the distance between us grew silently. It started when he went to college. He stopped calling as much. He stopped bringing friends over. He became careful, almost embarrassed, when I showed up on campus wearing my old winter jacket or carrying food for him. Still, I ignored it. I told myself he was young, busy, pressured. Mothers always find excuses for their children, even when those children no longer deserve excuses. The real shock came later, years later, when I discovered he had gotten married without even telling me. Married to a girl named Sabrina, the daughter of a wealthy, sharp-tongued couple who believed money was the only proof of worth. I didn't even know he was dating her. No engagement. No meeting. Nothing. One ordinary afternoon, he simply sat across from me and said, "Mom, I'm married." And I sat there, unable to breathe, unable to cry, unable to understand how the boy I had protected from every storm had built an entire life behind my back. But I told myself to be happy for him. I convinced myself that maybe her family would accept me. Maybe things would change. Maybe love would find its way back. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning of my downfall. Months passed, and slowly a strange pattern began. Ethan would call me, not to talk, not to visit, not to ask how I was, but only when he needed money. And every time he said the same thing. "Mom, it's just temporary. Mom, please, this is the last time. Mom, I promise I'll pay you back." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he still loved me, that he still needed me. So I paid his bills. I paid for their furniture. I paid when they bought a house. I paid when Sabrina wanted new decor. And I paid when their utilities were about to be cut. I told myself, this is normal. Mothers help their children. But the truth was darker. I wasn't helping him. I was funding his life. Their luxurious lifestyle, the sparkling floors, designer couches, imported kitchen appliances, none of it was theirs. It was mine. My savings, my husband's pension, the money I saved for emergencies. For 5 long years, almost everything, mortgage, bills, furniture, down payment, came from me. And still, I was never good enough. The final blow came when Ethan earned a big promotion at his company. A huge celebration was planned, hundreds of people, a ballroom, stage, camera crews, champagne. Everyone was invited. Colleagues, neighbors, even distant cousins from Sabrina's side. Everyone, except me. He stood in my living room, eyes avoiding mine, and said softly, "Mom, it's better if you don't come. It's a formal event. You might feel out of place." Feel out of place? At an event that my money helped make possible? I smiled that day, a small bitter smile that only mothers truly understand. The kind you wear when your heart is breaking but you pretend it's perfectly fine. But deep inside, something snapped. Quietly, cleanly, finally. And that was the moment my story truly began. I didn't sleep the night Ethan told me not to come to his promotion party. I sat at my small kitchen table with the same cup of tea that had gone cold hours earlier, staring at the wall as if it could explain how a mother becomes a burden to her own child. The words kept echoing in my head, "You might feel out of place." As if I were some stranger. As if I hadn't carried him in my arms when he had nightmares, or fed him when we barely had money for groceries, or stood for hours in freezing bleachers during his high school games just so he wouldn't look into the crowd and feel alone. But what hurt more than Ethan's words was the tone. Soft. Apologetic. Like he knew he was doing something wrong, yet did it anyway because fitting into his wife's world mattered more than the mother who raised him. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest. I didn't cry. Tears felt too small for what I felt. Instead, I moved around my little house quietly, doing laundry, dusting shelves, watering the potted plants that my husband Robert and I had once bought from a yard sale. Every room had memories, every picture frame whispered stories, and yet somehow, everything felt distant. As if my life belonged to someone else. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Sabrina. Even the way her name lit up my screen felt like an intrusion. "Linda," she said in her usual polished voice, "I need a small favor." A small favor. That's what she always called them. She never asked how I was. Never asked if I needed anything. Her calls came only when something needed to be paid for, or arranged. I took a breath and answered, "What do you need?" "I need you to pick up my parents from the airport today," she said casually, as if it were my responsibility. "Their flight lands at 3. I closed my eyes. "Sabrina, did Ethan not tell you? I'm not coming to the event." "Oh yes, he told me," she replied, with a tone that was half sympathy and half satisfaction. "But this isn't about the party. My parents don't use Uber, and they don't like taxis. They prefer, well, people they trust." People they trust? They didn't even trust me enough to acknowledge me as family. "I can't come," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief silence. Then she spoke sharply, a hint of annoyance creeping into her tone. "Linda, please don't make this difficult. It's embarrassing for us if they have to wait at the airport like regular people." I swallowed hard. Embarrassing. For them. Not one of them cared that I had been embarrassed by being excluded from my own son's celebration. But I said nothing. I simply hung up. For a moment, I stared at my phone, my reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. My hair graying. Wrinkles gently tracing the years of sacrifice. A simple woman who had given everything to her child, only to be told again and again she belonged nowhere. Then something inside me shifted. A small voice whispered, "Enough, Linda. Enough." A storm of memories rushed through me. Late-night transfers to help them pay their bills, furniture I paid for, groceries I bought, even the down payment for their house that I took from the savings Robert left behind. 5 years, 5 long years. Every month, thousands of dollars gone. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer where I kept receipts and bank papers. The folder was thick. so thick that it barely closed anymore. I placed it on the dining table and opened it. Bills, statements, notes, screenshots. Each one stabbed a little deeper into my heart. The truth was undeniable. Their beautiful home. Their fancy furniture. Their perfect lifestyle. Their parties. Their reputation. All of it existed because of me. I stared at the papers spread across my table like pieces of a puzzle I had avoided assembling. And then I finally said the words I should have said years ago. I'm done. The next day, I walked into my bank. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes and a neat ponytail, greeted me warmly. How can I help you today, ma'am? I'd like to cancel all automatic transfers from my account, I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. She typed for a moment, then looked up. Transfers to Ethan Collins. I nodded. My face didn't show what my heart felt. She confirmed everything, clicked a few buttons and said, "It's done." Done. A simple word. But for me, it felt like reclaiming my entire life. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun lowered itself behind the trees. The cold breeze touched my face gently, and I realized I was breathing differently. Slower, calmer, deeper. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of a phone call, or a bill, or a request. For the first time in years, I wasn't bending myself to fit into someone else's world. I didn't know then that this one decision, this single act of reclaiming my dignity, would soon set off a storm that would shake their perfect world to its core. A storm that would lead me straight to that stage. Straight to that microphone. Straight to the night the world would finally hear my truth. 2 days passed quietly after I cancelled the transfers. No calls. No messages. No angry texts from Ethan. No entitled demands from Sabrina. For the first time in years, my phone was silent, peacefully silent. I sat in my living room, sipping warm chamomile tea, letting the calm settle around me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. Outside, the trees swayed gently, and the neighborhood children were playing on their bicycles. Life looked simple again. But peace never lasts long when you've lived your whole life serving people who only know how to take. On the third morning, as I stepped outside to pick up my newspaper from the porch, the moment my fingers touched it, my heart froze. There, right on the front page of the local section, was my name. And next to it, a photo of me. A photo taken from my Facebook, one Sabrina had access to. The headline screamed, "Local woman abandons elderly couple at airport during winter storm." My breath caught in my chest. Winter storm? It had been 52 degrees and sunny that day. Abandons elderly couple? I hadn't even agreed to pick them up. Local woman? As if I were some stranger, not a mother who had been used for 5 years. My eyes scanned the article, each line cutting deeper than the last. It described how Sabrina's parents, an elderly, refined couple visiting their daughter for a special occasion, were forced to wait for hours in dangerous weather conditions because I had promised to pick them up and then never showed up. Every sentence was dripping with lies. Every paragraph painted me as irresponsible, unstable, heartless. Then came the quote that nearly made me drop the paper. "Her behavior has been concerning for some time," said a source close to the family. "We are worried about her mental state." Mental state? I felt my entire body heat with anger. My hands shook. My eyes burned. But the tears wouldn't fall, because shock is a strange thing. It freezes you before it lets you feel anything. I read further, and there it was. Reported by Patricia Morrison, the same journalist whose articles always favored the wealthy families of our town. It didn't take a genius to know how this happened. Sabrina's parents had connections. They had done this on purpose. They didn't just want to embarrass me. They wanted to destroy me. My phone buzzed suddenly. A message from an unknown number. Hope you learned your lesson. Don't ever disrespect my parents again. Sabrina. It was her tone. Sharp. Cold. Triumphant. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. The article wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a message. A war declaration. They wanted me humiliated so badly that I would come crawling back, falling into line, apologizing, and continuing to pay their bills quietly. But they didn't know something important. A mother who's been hurt doesn't crawl. She rises. I went back inside, sat at my dining table, placed the newspaper in front of me, and stared at my own face. The face of a woman who had spent her entire life giving, bending, sacrificing. A woman who had allowed herself to be treated like a servant. A woman who had let guilt and loneliness blind her. Not anymore. I picked up the article, folded it slowly, and placed it on top of the thick stack of receipts, bank statements, and proofs lying in my folder. My hands didn't shake this time. My voice didn't tremble when I whispered. They want war. Fine. Let's give them a war they'll never forget. For the next 3 days, I didn't leave my house. I turned my dining table into a battleground. Receipts spread like evidence of a crime. Bank statements highlighting 5 years of monthly transfers. Screenshots of Sabrina bragging online about their beautiful home and luxurious upgrades. All things I had paid for. Photos of the furniture I bought. Notes of every bill I cleared. Copies of every threatening message. Even printouts of Sabrina's comments mocking people who don't know how to dress for high-class events. Piece by piece, I put together a story. Not a story of victimhood, but a story of the truth. A truth I was going to deliver myself. Not through the newspaper. Not through a lawyer. Not through a quiet confrontation. But publicly. In front of the entire town. In front of every single one of their high-class guests. In front of everyone who believed their lies. I didn't know exactly how I would do it. Not yet. But I did know one thing. It was going to happen on the night of Ethan's promotion celebration. The night they had deliberately excluded me from. The night they wanted to shine more than ever. The night they wanted to prove their perfect life. That was going to be the night their perfect life shattered. For 3 days, my home looked less like a living room and more like the office of a private investigator. Every receipt, every transfer, every utility bill, every mortgage payment, every message from Ethan and Sabrina, they all formed a story I had been too blind, too loving, too hopeful to see. But the truth was finally in front of me. And I was done being blind. I kept thinking about that newspaper article, the lies, the humiliation, the way Sabrina's parents had painted me as some unstable old woman who had lost her sense of responsibility. They wanted people to believe I was the problem, that I was unpredictable, that I wasn't worth respect. But what hurt me the most was not the article. Not the lies. Not even the betrayal. It was the silence from my son. Ethan didn't call. He didn't defend me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even text, "Mom? Are you all right?" Not one word. I had raised a boy who would rather let the world believe his mother was mentally unstable than stand up to his wife or her elite family. That realization broke something in me, quietly, deeply, permanently. But heartbreak has a strange way of becoming fuel. The more I realized how far they had gone to tear me down, the stronger my resolve became to stand up, not out of revenge, but out of dignity. The night before Ethan's big promotion celebration, I sat at the dining table adjusting the documents for the 50th time. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be in order. I wasn't going to walk into that ballroom as a sad, humiliated mother. I was going to walk in as the woman who finally demanded the respect she had already earned. Around midnight, I opened my closet. I didn't have fancy clothes. No expensive gowns. No shimmering dresses like Sabrina wore. But I did have one thing. The navy blue dress Robert had bought for me on our 25th anniversary. Simple, elegant, respectful. The kind of dress that didn't scream for attention, yet never looked out of place in any room. I hung it outside the closet and touched the sleeve gently. "Robert," I whispered into the empty room, "I hope I make you proud tomorrow." I didn't sleep much that night. My heart was too loud. My thoughts were too busy. But strangely, I wasn't scared. For the first time in years, I felt something I had forgotten. Strength. Real, grounded strength. The next day, I prepared calmly. I ironed my dress. I packed my documents into a neat black folder. I placed the newspaper article right on top, so it would be the first thing Sabrina and her precious parents saw. And then I opened my phone. For the first time ever, I was the one sending the message. "Ethan, I won't be able to pick up Sabrina's parents today. I'm sure you'll understand." I turned off my phone. Let them go to the airport. Let them wait. Let them wonder. For once, the inconvenience belonged to them, not me. The sun had almost set when I left my house. My hands weren't shaking the way I expected they would. My legs didn't feel weak. If anything, I felt strangely steady, as if every hardship I had endured had led me to this exact moment. The hotel hosting Ethan's celebration was one of the most expensive in town. Its glass doors glowed with warm light, and expensive cars lined the valet. I parked my old sedan at the far end of the lot, grabbed my folder, and stepped out. As I walked toward the entrance, I could already hear the music, the clinking of glasses, the laughter. Expensive perfumes floated in the air. Guests in glittering dresses and sharp suits walked past me. But I didn't feel small. Not today. Inside the ballroom, Ethan stood on the grand stage in a tailored suit, smiling proudly as people clapped. He looked happy, confident, successful. Like the kind of man magazines write stories about. A man whose success was built on the quiet suffering of someone standing in the shadows. Me. The lights were bright, the camera flashes constant. The hall was packed. Hundreds of people, far more than I expected. Sabrina stood near the front, wearing a shimmering gold gown, laughing with a group of women who looked just like her. Polished, privileged, polished again. She didn't see me yet. No one did. I took a deep breath, clutched my folder, and stepped forward. It felt like stepping into fire. My heart beat loudly, not from fear, but from purpose. Step by step, I made my way through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations paused. People moved aside, confused by the older woman walking right toward the stage without hesitation. And then, Ethan saw me. His smile dropped. His eyes widened. He looked as if a ghost had walked into the room. For him, this moment was a nightmare. For me, it was the beginning of freedom. I walked up the stage stairs, one hand on the railing, one clutching my folder. The entire ballroom was now silent. Hundreds of eyes fixated on me. Sabrina's face turned pale. Her parents froze in their seats. I reached the stage. Ethan took a step toward me, whispering urgently, "Mom, what are you doing here?" I looked him dead in the eyes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the mother who stayed quiet. I stepped toward the microphone. I stood there, on that grand stage, under those blinding white lights, surrounded by hundreds of wealthy guests who had no idea what was coming. Ethan was frozen beside me, pale and terrified, like a child caught doing something he shouldn't have. I could feel every heartbeat inside my chest. Slow, steady, powerful. Not the trembling heartbeat of a frightened mother, but the heartbeat of a woman who had finally reached her limit. I turned toward the microphone. The host rushed toward me, whispering sharply, "Ma'am, this is a private event." I raised my hand. He stopped instantly. There was something in my eyes, something in my voice, something in my posture that told him, "This isn't a moment you interrupt." I leaned forward, adjusted the microphone, and spoke. My voice wasn't shaky. It didn't tremble. It didn't waver. It filled the hall like a calm storm. "Good evening. My name is Linda Carter. I am Ethan's mother." A ripple went through the ballroom. Some people recognized me from the newspaper photo. Some whispered. Some stared. But no one looked away. I raised the folded newspaper in my hand. "This article, written about me 2 days ago, is a lie." Gasps. Murmurs. Shock. But I didn't stop. "Since most of you read it, let me correct it with the truth." I unfolded the paper, held it up high so the entire hall could see my photo. "You were told I abandoned Sabrina's parents at the airport during a winter storm. Interesting, considering the weather that day was sunny and warm." A few guests exchanged confused looks. I continued. "You were told I'm unstable, irresponsible, mentally unwell. But what you were not told is this." I stepped aside, opened my black folder, and held up the first document. For 5 years. Every bill in Ethan and Sabrina's household was paid by me. The mortgage. I held up the statements. The electricity. The gas. The water. More papers. Their furniture. Photos I had printed. Their car insurance, home insurance, credit card payments. Statements with highlighted amounts. And every month, without fail, I transferred money quietly, without asking for thanks. Dead silence. Not even a whisper now. "You see this beautiful home they brag about?" I held up screenshots from Sabrina's social media. It was furnished with my money. You could hear the breath leave people's lungs. Sabrina stepped forward, her voice tight. "Stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." I turned toward her slowly. "No, dear. I'm revealing the truth you worked very hard to hide." A collective "Oh my God" rippled through the room. I returned to the microphone. For 5 years, I gave them everything. Because Ethan was my son. Because I believed he needed help. Because I wanted him to live comfortably. I paused. But when I stopped paying, this, I lifted the newspaper again, is how they repaid me. The spotlight caught the tears pooling in my eyes, but they didn't fall. Not this time. Let the world see strength, not weakness. I pulled out the printed threatening messages Sabrina had sent. Here are the messages I received after I refused to keep paying. I read them clearly. "Hope you learned your lesson. Don't ever disrespect my parents again. You live because we allow you to." Sabrina's face turned white. Ethan looked like he might faint. I placed the messages on the podium. But it didn't end there. She used her parents' connections to publish a false story about me, just to break me. I let the silence settle. A heavy, undeniable silence. And tonight, you celebrate Ethan's promotion. A promotion he earned, partly because he never had to worry about bills, rent, or life responsibilities, since his mother handled them. Several guests turned to look at Ethan now, judging, questioning, whispering. His image, his perfect, polished reputation, was cracking. I softened my voice. I never wanted public attention. I never wanted fame. I never wanted this stage. I placed my hand over the folder of documents. All I wanted was to be treated with respect. To be spoken to like a human being. To be valued, not used. My eyes traveled across the room, meeting the stares of people who were now seeing me completely differently. And to my son. I turned to Ethan. My heart didn't break this time. It hardened. You let your wife humiliate me. You let her parents call me names. You allowed them to plaster lies about me in the newspaper. You stood by silently. Because it was easier than standing up for your own mother. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He shook his head, trying to speak. But I raised my hand again. No. You had 5 years to speak. Tonight, you listen. His tears fell. Mine didn't. And finally, I inhaled deeply. This will be the last time I ever explain myself. To you. To her. To anyone. A hush swept across the hall. I placed the folder down on the podium and stepped back from the microphone. I am leaving now. And I am taking my dignity with me. I turned away from the mic, lifted my chin, and walked off the stage with steady steps. Each step louder in meaning than the applause that suddenly erupted behind me. Yes. The applause. Guests were clapping. Some stood. Some shook their heads at Ethan and Sabrina. Some whispered angrily about the lies. But I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I had won something far more valuable than money or respect. I had won myself. When I stepped out of that ballroom, I expected anger. Maybe shouting. Maybe Sabrina running after me with her usual sharp tongue. Maybe Ethan trying to drag me away before anyone could gossip. But instead, there was nothing. Only the echo of applause behind me. And the heavy, suffocating silence of a life finally breaking apart. I walked through the hotel corridor slowly, my heart pounding. Not with fear, but with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Outside, the night air was cold against my skin. The parking lot lights flickered softly, and for a moment, I simply stood beside my old sedan breathing, letting the weight of 5 years fall off my shoulders. But while I drove home in quiet, something entirely different was happening back inside that ballroom. Their world, the world they had built on lies, was cracking open. Later, I learned exactly how. Guests weren't whispering quietly. They were talking loudly, openly, boldly. The same high-class people Sabrina worshipped suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. One woman, someone Sabrina idolized, had even said, "If my son treated me like that, I'd disown him." Another added, "Imagine living in a house your mother paid for and then humiliating her publicly." Some people left the party immediately. Some refused to congratulate Ethan further. Some demanded the event organizers remove Sabrina's parents from the VIP table. Sabrina's golden image shattered right there. Her parents, who loved to show off their elegance, were being pointed at, judged, criticized. And for people like them, reputation was everything. Ethan stood on the stage, frozen, humiliated. Cameras that had been taking celebratory photos a few minutes earlier were now capturing the fall of his pride. Around midnight, the facade collapsed completely. The hotel manager approached them with an awkward smile and said, "We were informed the payment for the event hasn't cleared. We'll need a confirmation." Sabrina's face went blank. Ethan checked his banking app in panic. Declined. 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 Their perfect life had been financed entirely by me. Once the money stopped, the truth came out. Their bills were overdue. Their credit cards maxed. The fancy car's insurance unpaid. The mortgage behind 2 months. Their entire financial world had been standing on matchsticks. And I was the person holding those matchsticks. Without me, everything fell. By the next week, the consequences began. 1. Their house went into pre-foreclosure. The same house Sabrina posted about online, calling it our luxurious home. 2. Sabrina's father's business partners pulled out of a major deal. No one wanted to be associated with a family involved in public scandal. 3. Their fancy social circle blocked them, unfollowed them, and cut them off. 4. Ethan's company launched a quiet internal inquiry. Why? Because suddenly everyone wanted to know how a man earning his salary could afford such a lavish lifestyle. And when Ethan couldn't answer, they did. They found the truth. 5. Sabrina's parents received a warning letter from the local newspaper. Publishing false information can result in legal consequences. It was like watching a castle made of glass collapse from every side. And I didn't lift a single finger. I just stopped paying. That was enough. 2 weeks later, on a Friday evening, a knock echoed through my house. I knew that knock. It was the same uncertain, hesitant knock Ethan used as a boy when he broke something or needed help with homework. I opened the door. There he was. Not the polished man from the promotion night. Not the golden boy dressed in tailored suits. Just my son. Eyes red. Face tired. Clothes wrinkled. A man finally crushed by his own decisions. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then finally, "Mom, I'm sorry." His voice cracked. Completely shattered. Behind him, Sabrina stood silently, makeup smudged, hair messy, and for the first time since I met her, without arrogance. I didn't move. I didn't invite them in. Not yet. Years of pain does not disappear in a single apology. I ruined everything, Ethan whispered. I let them treat you like nothing. And you were the only person who ever stood by me. Sabrina stepped forward, her voice low and trembling. Mrs. Linda, I was wrong. I judged you. I mocked you. I hurt you. And I'm sorry. Truly. Her eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness is not a door you open because someone suddenly knocks. It's a decision. A boundary. A new beginning. And I was not the same woman who once stayed silent. I looked at both of them calmly. You are welcome to apologize, I said softly. But you are not welcome to take advantage of me again. Not now. Not ever. Both of them nodded silently, tears falling. I stepped aside slightly, not enough to let them back into my life fully, but enough to let them know the door wasn't locked forever. Boundaries. Respect. Self-worth. These were now the rules of my life. And for the first time, I felt free. When I closed the door that evening, after Ethan and Sabrina walked away, I leaned my forehead against the wood and exhaled a long, trembling breath. Not because I was hurt, but because I finally felt something that had been missing for years. Peace. Real, solid, grounding peace. The house was quiet. No demands, no responsibilities I didn't choose, no guilt weighing on my chest. Just the warm hum of the heater and the gentle ticking of the clock in the hallway. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the streetlights glow softly against the night sky. For years, I had imagined this moment, the moment when my son would realize the truth, when the lies would collapse, when the weight I carried would finally lift. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would feel satisfaction. But instead, I felt something bittersweet. A mother never stops loving her child. Even when he wounds her deeply. Even when he forgets her sacrifices. Even when he chooses others over her. Love doesn't disappear. It simply learns. And mine had learned how to protect itself. The next morning, I woke up early, made a simple breakfast, and opened the windows to let the sunlight in. I looked around my home, modest, old, a little worn out, but full of memories Robert and I had created. It reminded me of who I used to be before I became someone's wallet, someone's convenience, someone's backup plan. I wanted to find myself again. So, I began making changes. Small ones at first. I took long walks in the mornings, something I stopped doing years ago. I dusted the old books Robert loved and placed them neatly on the shelf. I sorted my kitchen cabinets and donated things I no longer needed. I rearranged the living room into a space that felt mine. But the biggest change came a week later. I was sitting on the porch, sipping coffee when my neighbor, sweet old Mrs. Turner, walked over holding a flyer. "Linda," she said, "you should join this. It's a support group for women your age. Widows, mothers, women who've gone through a lot. They meet every Thursday." I smiled politely, ready to decline out of habit. But something in me hesitated. Maybe it was time. Maybe I needed a place where I wasn't Ethan's mother. Where I wasn't the woman who paid the bills. Where I wasn't the victim of a newspaper lie. Maybe I needed a place where I was simply Linda. So, I went. The community center was bright and warm, filled with women chatting softly, laughing, sharing stories. The moment I walked in, I was greeted with kindness. Not judgment, not pity. Just warmth. We sat in a circle, introduced ourselves, and shared our journeys. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and said, "My name is Linda. I'm 62 years old. I lost my husband years ago, and recently I found myself again." The women smiled. Some nodded knowingly. Some squeezed my hand gently. It felt good. It felt safe. It felt healing. Week after week, I kept going, and slowly, piece by piece, I built a life that wasn't centered around anyone else's expectations. I joined a senior yoga class. I volunteered once a week at the library. I met women who understood loneliness and strength in ways only life can teach. I found joy in small rituals, watering my plants, reading in the evenings, cooking for myself. My days weren't empty anymore. They were full, like they belonged to me again. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. One Thursday evening, after our group meeting, I stayed behind to help arrange chairs. As I was stacking them, a gentle voice came from behind me. "Need a hand?" I turned and saw a man, maybe in his mid-60s, kind eyes, a warm smile, wearing a neatly pressed shirt. He'd been in the group for months, but this was the first time he approached me directly. His name was Henry. A widower. Kind. Soft-spoken. Quietly funny in the way only mature men can be. We ended up talking for nearly an hour, about life, about our late spouses, about the strange resilience grief creates. For the first time in years, I laughed. Genuinely laughed. When we stepped outside, he walked me to my car. "Linda," he said softly, "I enjoy talking with you. Maybe we could have coffee sometime? Only if you'd like." I stood there under the soft glow of the streetlight, surprised by the warmth rising in my chest. I wasn't ready for anything new. Not yet. But I also wasn't closing the door. Because for the first time since Robert died, I felt alive again. "Coffee sounds nice," I said. His smile widened, gentle, respectful. And as I sat in my car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, I whispered to myself, "You're allowed to be happy, Linda. You're allowed to start again." And for the first time, I believed it. Life doesn't change in one moment. It changes in quiet shifts, slow, gentle, almost unnoticeable. Until one day you look around and realize you're living differently than before. For me, that realization came a month after everything fell apart. The scandal had died down. People had moved on. But Ethan and Sabrina were still living through the consequences of their choices. Their home was officially listed for sale. Their credit score was damaged. Sabrina's parents had withdrawn financially, embarrassed by the public humiliation they brought upon themselves. And Ethan, my son who once walked with pride, was now living in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town. Not because I wished him pain. Not because I wanted revenge. But because sometimes, life has to strip a person down so they can rebuild from the truth, not illusions. During those weeks, Ethan came by a few more times. Not asking for money. Not demanding support. Just wanting to talk. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, eyes lowered like a boy confessing to a broken window. "Mom," he murmured, "I didn't just mess up. I lost myself." I listened silently, not interrupting, letting him speak. He told me how Sabrina's family's expectations consumed him. How the need to fit in drowned his sense of responsibility. How he slowly stopped seeing my sacrifices as love, and instead saw them as normal. He cried. Really cried. And maybe a part of me healed in those tears. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't run into old habits. But I did place my hand gently over his. "Ethan," I whispered, "loving you never broke me. Forgetting myself did." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I want to change," he said. "I want to be better. A better son. A better man." I took a breath. "You can, Ethan. But change doesn't begin here." I tapped his chest. "It begins here." I pointed to his choices. And for the first time, he understood. Sabrina changed too. Not instantly, but slowly. One afternoon she came alone, without makeup, without that polished image she hid behind. She looked younger, smaller, human. "Linda," she said softly, "for years I thought money and status made people greater. But the night you spoke on that stage, I realized I've never met anyone stronger than you." She hesitated. "I want to earn your forgiveness, not ask for it." I nodded gently. "Respect," I told her, "begins with honesty." She nodded, eyes glistening. It would take time. But I was willing to let her try. Not for her, but for my son. Meanwhile, my life blossomed in ways I never expected. My meetings with the support group became a highlight of my week. I found friends who understood me. Women who lifted me up instead of using me. And in the midst of this quiet renewal, my connection with Henry deepened. We didn't rush. We didn't label anything. We just enjoyed each other's company. Walks at the park. Coffee after group meetings. Long conversations about books, life, and the stubbornness of aging joints. He was gentle, kind, patient. And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought had died with Robert. Warmth. One evening, as we walked along the riverside, he stopped and looked at me with soft, sincere eyes. "Linda, I'm glad our paths crossed." I smiled, genuinely, fully. "So am I." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what this connection would become. But I knew one thing. I wasn't afraid of life anymore. Months passed, and things settled into a new normal. Ethan found a modest job that matched his real financial situation, not the fantasy he once lived in. Sabrina took responsibility for her actions. They both worked hard, slowly rebuilding their lives, this time without shortcuts, without lies, without my wallet behind them. And I rebuilt myself. My home was mine again, peaceful, quiet, warm. My mornings were mine. My evenings were mine. My choices were mine. I wasn't the woman who slept with her phone next to her pillow waiting for demands. I wasn't the woman who carried guilt like a shadow. I wasn't the woman who swallowed humiliation because family is everything. No. I had learned something far more powerful. Family means love. Not sacrifice without limits. Not silence. Not being used. Not losing yourself. One afternoon, while packing away old receipts and documents into a storage box, I found the newspaper article. The one that had started this entire storm. I held it for a long moment, then smiled softly. Not in bitterness. Not in pain. But in triumph. Because that article didn't break me. It freed me. I folded it neatly, placed it inside the box, closed the lid, and whispered, "That chapter is closed." Then I walked outside, sat on my porch, and watched the golden sunlight paint the sky. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I felt strong. I felt Linda. A woman who gave everything, lost herself, and finally found herself again. A woman who, after a lifetime of loving others, finally learned to love herself.